Welcome to another episode of Your Money, Your Mission, the podcast designed to turn complex financial situations into actionable advice, powered by Johnson Financial Group. I'm your host, Kelly Mould, and today we're focusing on the sandwich generation and tips on how to balance caregiving, parenting, and finances. Joining me today is Kathy Ciszewski, Senior Vice President, Private Client Banking at Johnson Financial Group. She'll share her insights. Thank you so much for being here, Kathy.
Thanks for having me, Kelly. This is such a timely topic. In fact, I was just talking about this very topic last night at a client meeting.
Yes, and it's so great to work with you because I know this comes up a lot. We have clients of varying ages and stages of life, and to be able to help them navigate some of this is really important. So why don't we start out with, for folks that don't know, can you tell us a little bit about who's in this sandwich generation?
Mm-hmm. So the sandwich generation term was actually coined back in the 1980s. It was originally primarily women because the women were, especially during that age, more of the caregivers. And it was meant to describe that they were sandwiched in between caring for their young children and caring for their aging parents. That over time, that has kind of evolved, and I would put the sandwich generation kind of into two separate groups. The primary group that we normally think about are people, say, in their 50s into their 60s.
Okay.
They are now caring for those aging parents. They may be still caring for children. Most of them might be young adults at this point. But as we know, young adults are staying with the family longer than what they used to.
Sure.
Or they could also be caring for grandchildren at that point.
Right.
The second section that we would talk about would really be, like my children. So those adult kids that are in their 25 to 40 that are just starting out with their career. They are most likely looking to buy a house, might be dealing with student loan debt, are caring for young children.
Sure. So it's interesting. When I think about my grandparents, they didn't worry about this as much. And I know part of that is because our life expectancy has changed. But we're also seeing some trends with younger families, people starting their families later, right? So that is making this a more common situation.
Correct.
So as we talk about navigating this, let's talk about that first group that's engaged in the caring today. And I would fall into that group. My mother is 80, although she's a very vibrant 80, doesn't need a whole lot of care. But certainly that is something that I'm going to be doing, and a lot of my peers are faced with today. Can you talk to me about some of the concerns for the group that's taking care of aging parents?
Can be difficult,
Yes.
especially people in that silent generation that are not typically comfortable talking about their finances.
Right.
And so trying to find the right opportunity to have that conversation with them, you have to be a little strategic about that. You know, the across the table at Christmas is probably not time to yell, "Hey, Mom, can you afford this?" Whatever she's doing at the time.
Right. Well, certainly the silent generation and the baby boomers, talking about money was taboo, right? So that's difficult to talk about. They're also somewhat hesitant to talk about their health often, maybe even talking about what their estate planning or what their thoughts for that are. That really has typically been taboo, right? So there's a lot that's sensitive.
Correct. And I know my own mother would never talk about her health. And if she went to the doctor, whatever that doctor said was right, and she didn't question anything. And so to find a gentle way to make yourself available to go to those doctor's appointments with your parent or aging relative, to have that second set of ears for them. But you need to do it in such a way that you're not taking away their dignity. You need to do it with empathy. As a child, it is so easy to still think about our parents as how they used to be. in their mental capacity as opposed to where they may be today. And we wanted to say, Mom, why are you doing that? And you need to change your tone of voice when you talk to them. You need to be calm when you talk to them, because having you or them agitated is not really going to get you where you want to go.
It's interesting you say that, Kathy, because I remember when I was younger, and my mom probably was in her mid-40s, and she started to have some of the eye problems that we eventually, and I remember being intolerant, like, Mom, why don't you have your glasses, or having to read a menu.
Right.
I remember being very intolerant. And then I turned 45, and karma is a thing, right? I realized how insensitive I had been. I know they are facing some things that feel strange to us because we've not seen it before, but require that empathy and that sensitivity.
One of the ways that I think about it, to be honest, is I want to model the behavior that I want my children, how I want my children to treat me.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you can step back and really think about, is this the example I want to set for my own children, the way you treat someone in that situation, I can then try to model that behavior.
And you've heard me say this before, one of your superpowers is your ability to listen so carefully to people as they share their experiences and they share what's important to them. Tell me a little bit about how that comes into play when children are trying to find out what their parents need, what they want, what they can do. How do you handle that conversation and really focus on the listening part?
It's a conscious effort. And it's a conscious effort to try to listen to a comment that they might make that you can expand on to say, what, Dad, tell me a little bit more about that. Or, Dad, how did that make you feel? Or when you heard this, what action did you, why did you decide to take that action? And if you can approach it from a sense of curiosity as opposed to a sense of what are you talking about, I think you need to try to get them to open up and feel comfortable expressing their real feelings where they don't feel that you are judging them.
Right. And I've heard you, when you're talking to people, say that it's so important to really understand what their wishes are, what their goals are with this, and really ascertaining that so that you can surround them with the right support and care, I think is so critical. So when we talk about some of these sensitive issues, certainly the financial one is difficult. So how does someone say, okay, I want to make sure that you're not exploited, there's so much fraud out there. How do you start that conversation so that you don't feel like you're intruding on them, but you're protecting them from the kind of fraud and being able to be kind of belt and suspenders to their financial situation?
Maybe you use an example of something that you've heard on the news that has happened. Maybe you use an example, fortunately, unfortunately, we hear it at the bank all the time. It's way too common. But if you can use an example to your loved one of this happening to somebody else, then you can kind of bring it back to say, Mom, I just want to make sure that this doesn't also happen to you.
Right.
As opposed to trying to attack them and saying, don't ever do this, don't do this, do this. If you can start it out gently the other way to bring them along, I think that's a much better, you get a much better outcome that way.
And I know another thing that's really important, and from my previous experience, making sure that people have their estate planning documents, particularly the power of attorneys. How do you navigate that conversation as a family member that says, hey, I don't know if you have this stuff, I don't know who it is, but I really need to understand if I have to step up and help you in any way. How do you do that?
Again, I think you need to try to find a way to bring up the topic that could be part of the natural course of the conversation. It's hard, right? To try to, but you need to, every situation is going to be slightly different because your loved one and their mental capacity might be different. Right. So starting the conversation sooner rather than later is good because you can truly get to what they're thinking before their judgment gets clouded.
That is such an important point, Kathy, because we've kind of talked about it as, in this context, as someone suspecting something and they need to act. But isn't it much more prudent for us as we start to age to facilitate those conversations ourselves? Like, can you tell me some of the advantages and how people would do that? I know the reason I say this is I have one child that they would talk about it, no problem. I have another child that doesn't want to have that conversation, doesn't want to contemplate my passing. So how would you suggest as parents we start to do that so we have more control, right?
So I believe that is the best gift you can actually give your children, is to have those items set up in advance. So when they're grieving, they don't have to think about it. You know, I have one child that would be the person I would turn to all day long on the health care. I have another child that is my financial power of attorney, and I've actually sat down with him to say, here are where my documents are. Here are, the other thing that we don't think about are all of the things that are all online now.
Right.
You know, years ago, if somebody passed, you waited for all their mail to come and you could find out where everything was. We don't get statements on things anymore.
Right.
So as a gift to your children would be to have, you don't have to tell them everything, but you want to maybe once a year have an updated list to say, if something happens to me, here's the file that, you know, just in case file. Here's the name of my attorney. Here's the name of my CPA. Here's the name of my wealth advisor, investment advisor that you need to talk to. Here's the name of my private banker. You know, these are the people that can help you navigate this. Here's where you find the passwords to my Netflix account so you can turn that off.
Right.
You know, here's where you find, you know, just even knowing what subscriptions I may have. Your mother.
Right.
Do you know what she all subscribes to that you would have to try to deal with and how you could access those?
We have to have more conversations for sure. It's interesting because you bring this up with the passwords. And as I think about my mother too, one of the concerns I have for her is technology is moving incredibly fast, faster in her lifetime than she ever imagined. It's even moving fast for us. I mean, we know that, right?
Yeah.
But not forcing yourself, doing the best you can to be more technically savvy is becoming a bigger and bigger detriment, wouldn't you say?
Yes.
And so, you know, not kind of assuming that you don't have to isn't going to be an option, right? Even understanding test results for healthcare, scheduling appointments, knowing if there's been any fraud on a credit account, you know, those kinds of things. It is really essential that people either have those abilities or have a trusted person. Would you not say that that checks that regularly?
Correct. A conversation I had with a client this morning, they were talking about their aging parents and they had just redone their estate plan. I mean, beautiful. The fact that they were updating it, looking at everything. But when they talked to them about it, they hadn't signed the documents yet. As they were going through the documents with them, they needed to upload it into a PDF file and send it back to the attorney. They didn't know how to do that. So even though they might do the thing, whatever that is, because of the technology, they weren't able to complete it. And as a child, or, you know, for your caregiver, you know, ask if you can review those documents. Ask them if they need any help with that, because they're probably too proud to ask.
Right. That's a problem, right? And asking for help when you need it. We talked about the conversation, and I know you're one of, I'm going to get this right, Kathy. Are you one of 8 children?
I am.
And I'm one of 3. So the other struggle sometimes is making sure that the entire family is, you know, involved in this conversation. We share a client that we adore who it was really important to this couple that their children not be burdened with having to make tough decisions that they want to control. Can you share a little bit about that?
Elderly couple in their early 80s at the time, mid 80s at the time, had been in their home for over 50 years.
Yeah, I think they built it, didn't they? Like in the 60s, right?
They did. They
Every
did.
memory, everything they ever had was.
3 adult children, all live in different parts of the country. None of them live here. They made the decision to downsize their home and move into, they researched all of the assistant living centers out there, one that they could age in place. That, for now they have their own apartment, they're living independently, but if and when one of them should need some care, they can be right in that same facility. It was difficult to go through 50 years worth of stuff in your house.
Right.
But again, what a wonderful gift that they just gave their children, that was not a trying to go through mom and dad's sentimental things. If there were things within the house, they did offer them to all the kids, and the things that the children wanted that were sentimental to them, they got to have the enjoyment of giving it to them, as opposed to later.
Right, and they've taken all these difficult conversations and pitfalls that many of us have experienced away because the children don't have to worry; they can age in place at this care.
It's a beautiful story,
and I found it really inspiring that they were willing to do the work and recognize that this way they get to choose where they're going to be comfortable, what they're going to like.
Correct.
And now it's been some years and they've really enjoyed this experience. It's opened up a whole new social network for them as well, which was really important.
Right. Speaking of social network, that is so important to, again, as a caregiver, you want to try to provide opportunities for your loved ones to have that socialization even outside of you. Because going back to the sandwich generation, those are the most stressful, challenging times typically of somebody's life, because they are having to pull themselves in so many different directions.
Oh, sure. Between the caregiving for children, their self needs, the needs of their parents, it is incredibly stressful.
So going back to this family, they have dinner with different people every night at the facility where they're living. Trying to find outlets for them to have some socialization outside of you.
Right.
Could be time consuming, but so important to everybody's well-being.
Right. We've seen a lot of data around the loneliness factor, especially in the United States, with 40% of adults experiencing some type of isolation or loneliness.
Correct.
And we know
that's all ages.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And if the pandemic taught us nothing, it taught us at least that the critical part of socialization matters not just to our emotional well-being, but our physical well-being. And it doesn't stop at any age.
And I even know myself, through the pandemic, the more you don't do it, the less you want to. And so you really do need to keep that up. It's, I think, very difficult to pull into yourself and become a hermit and then say, oh, nope, I'm not going to do that anymore, and I'm going to go out. It makes it doubly hard to do that. So
it does.
That's something as a caregiver, again, the sandwich generation, I think you have to watch both ends.
Right.
Both our adult children, possibly, and our aging parents.
Yes, taking care of ourselves, taking care of each other, and making sure our social network, which is a safety network, both for our parents, encouraging them to get up, get out, don't give up, right? Just keep doing that. And then for us to have the support of saying, I need to spend some time with my friend Kathy today instead of, doing other things. I need my personal time. The safety net piece is important when we talk about caregivers in particular. I don't know that we've seen more and more about the strain that caregiving has on individuals. And we've often seen it's been the spouse who, carries the laboring oar for that. And I've seen so many circumstances where that caregiver, because of the intense pressure on them for that caregiving, actually passes first.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to, I think, as a society, pay more attention to the needs of caregiving.
And I think there was just a famous person in the news recently.
Yeah, you're referring to the Gene Hackman tragedy, and that was tough. His wife was the primary caregiver, and she came down with an illness and passed away in their home. And because his dementia was so extreme, and there wasn't a regular check-in done for them,
Right.
he couldn't protect himself. He couldn't navigate for help, and passed away as well. So what a tragedy, and what a message to all of us that we need that safety net. We need those check-ins. And so for caregivers to also recognize that and build that safety net and most of us, and I know you and we talk about this a lot, as we age, the things we need to do so that we are as vibrant and healthy as we can. And so some of those key things that I know you and I talk about a lot, let's share those.
Finding time to do strength training.
Yes.
Finding time to go for a walk.
Mm-hmm.
Finding time to be in nature. Deep breathing. Just sometimes it's just better, you just need to stop and take a deep breath.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy to say, but really hard to do and remember.
It is.
To
It
do.
is. Eating right, the physical pieces that you talked about, that strength training that we often don't even think about, right?
Correct.
That requires some real focus as well.
And these are all things that whether you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s, all the way up, if you don't start doing them early, you're not all of a sudden magically going to do them when you're 65.
Right.
They need to become part of your normal routine.
Right.
And I know it's hard because you're being stretched in so many different directions, but sometimes you just have to make sure you sit back, take a breath, and make sure you're taking care of yourself.
So that's a great point, Kathy. Let's kind of pivot to younger generations, our children and people. What advice would we have for them to be prepared financially and physically, emotionally, as we know that they're going to be taking care of parents, taking care of children, taking care of themselves? What kinds of things should we be talking about?
Well, I tell my own
early on?
kids, just have your basement ready for me. No, I'm just teasing. A financial plan,
Right.
even for a younger family. Budgeting tools, or I like to call it a spending plan, because you really are looking at, but they're being, it's hard when you're paying as much for daycare as you are for a mortgage payment.
Right. Right.
Saving for a house. So it's as a unit, whatever that unit may look like, sitting down and going, what are our major goals? What professionals do we need to try to? It's okay to ask for help, because you can't do it all on your own.
Right.
Well, some people think they can, but it's do the things that give you the most joy and pleasure, and then ask for help for the other things.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we're talking about kind of the ways we want young adults to prepare for it. But I know that you've started having those conversations about money and planning and even estate planning with your children much younger.
At a young age. And so one of the things that, if you have your very young children, you start out with a allowance. I mean, I used to tell my children, Mom needs to go to work. That's my job. You need to go to school. That's your job. And we all share in the family resources then. And you need to contribute to the household. And so maybe your job is to take the trash out, or your job is to do this. And they got a weekly or a monthly allowance that then they were suggested very, very heavily, where they would save some for the future. They had some to spend. And then they have some to possibly invest. Talking to them about ways to save money. Opening up a simple passport account for them, savings account that you physically take them to the bank with you to make the deposit. I remember distinctly sitting in Georgie Porgy's when my son had his first job, and we talked about a Roth IRA. And he went home that day and he goes, Dad, I'm getting a Roth IRA. So, it
Only
is,
the child of a banking person
yeah,
would
I know,
get that
would be
excited.
all excited about that. Doing things, but also modeling behavior. At a younger age, I realized that all they saw mom and dad do when we went to a store is pay with a credit card, because that's what we do today. And so I'm thinking, if I'm that child, anytime you go to the store, you just get out this magic card and you can buy whatever you want. So you need to have the conversations about, what is that card? That's actually credit, and talking through, how do you build your credit, as they age and as they age, and what's appropriate for them. But modeling, the kids are very observant.
Yeah, that is a great point. I know our CIO, and we admittedly hang around with a lot of nerds,
Yeah.
and he wanted his son to understand, the opportunity cost, the value of money, and so he has 3 jars. One of the jars is the money he can spend.
Mhm.
One of the jars is the money he can save, and the other is the interest he can earn on what he saves. He wanted him to see that grow, and they were shopping for a pair of cleats, sports shoes, and the son wanted the most elaborate, coolest shoes
Of
for
course.
180, right? And he said, "Look, this is how much we're going to spend. You can spend it all on this pair of shoes that is the coolest, or you can spend half on a pair of shoes that does the same job, and you can put the other
Yep.
in these jars." And so he's very much illustrating to him what that earning that he is going to get, how the money will work for him,
Yeah.
and really understanding wants from needs,
Mhm.
right? And
And-
that's tough,
And choices. I
Right.
mean, every choice has a consequence.
right?
Whether that's, I have more money later on for something else, or I have whatever this thing in that wore out or broke in 2 minutes. I mean, it's about helping them make an educated choice about their decisions.
And they children do, as you said, absorb a lot, and you can start talking about this at a very young age.
Yep.
But it's probably also important to keep talking about it as they age and as they start to get their first job and then can understand things like a Roth
Correct.
IRA or
I know
prepare
my-
for college.
I know my daughter-in-law sometimes doesn't like me because my son updates his budget on a weekly basis, and she's like, "You created a monster." So,
Well, there's upside and downside
to being a
having
banker's son,
right.
child.
Right. And you talked also about, so we and I think you and I have seen this, that there's certainly much more openness about talking about money, talking about those hard decisions,
Correct.
end of life things, estate planning. And this doesn't necessarily mean like they're having a conversation where they're saying, "Mom, what am I going to inherit?" That's not the conversation we're talking about.
Correct.
We're talking about what's important to you and sharing that with your children. And you and I have the pleasure often of hearing people talk about what their legacy will be, what their very generous hopes and dreams are for not just their children, but very often charitable, community kind of focused things.
And Kelly, one of the things that it's been, I know, very rewarding for me to be involved in is we've been fortunate to be able to facilitate family meetings.
Yes.
For
yes.
some of these clients, where they will bring in their adult children, and we didn't talk specifically all of the numbers, but the concepts about what their parents' legacy, some of their values and things that they've wanted to impart to their children, and how they would want their children to carry these things on. And so those are such, you don't, obviously your financial professional is happy to help with that, but you don't have to have a professional in the room with you to have such a meeting. And again, I'll go back to what a great gift to your children of informing them.
Absolutely. Any final tips?
Couple of things is, there are resources out there for people to use. I know a lot of times we decide to do it on our own, but, utilize your professional, utilize where appropriate, your CPA, your attorney, your investment professional. There are websites. The Aging and Disability Resource Center website is a great resource for both people who are in that stage or the caregivers,
Right.
where they can talk about, food and nutrition. I mean, it's the whole gamut. There's also companies out there, assistant living locators that help people when the time comes where they need to go into some sort of assisted living. That's an overwhelming thing to try to navigate on your own. So there are companies out there that can help you do that are paid for by the assisted living centers, not by you personally. So I would encourage people to utilize them.
A huge advantage for families.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Kathy. Sharing your experience has been incredibly valuable. We hope our listeners have gained valuable insights into how the sandwich generation can navigate the challenges of caring for aging parents and preparing their children for the future. And thanks to all of you for tuning in. If you have questions you'd like us to tackle, please go to the show notes, type your question, and hit submit. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on future episodes of Your Money, Your Mission, the podcast designed to turn complex financial situations into actionable advice, powered by Johnson Financial Group.
This podcast is not a recommendation to buy or sell any investment or financial product. Whether a particular investment or financial solution is right for you depends on the facts of your particular situation. Please consult your own professional advisors prior to taking any action based on the content of this podcast. Bank services are provided by Johnson Bank, member FDIC, equal housing lender. Bank services are provided without regard to race, color, national origin, sex, handicap, or familial status.